Hello, and welcome to my book review on Wuthering Heights. So before we get into all the fun stuff, we're going to do some non-spoiler parts, talk a little bit about plot structure and elements, a rating, a recommendation. I've got my notes here ready to go. So my non-spoiler summary of Wuthering Heights. Interesting book just to start off, just to start us off strong. Interesting book. Non-spoilers ahead. Wuthering Heights follows a man named Lockwood as he rents a home in the isolated moors of England. After he meets his landlord, the brooding and arrogant Heathcliff, my favorite leading man, Lockwood's curiosity gets the best of him, and he has Heathcliff's maid, Nellie, tell him the story of Heathcliff's life as he jots it down in a journal. Hopefully he got permission. As the story goes on, we are taken on a tale of love, death, and revenge, as Nellie's tale takes us from decades ago to present day in Wuthering Heights. So, overall, I really do enjoy this book. I have read it a few times now, and I overall give it like a 9 out of 10. I think it's great. It has great elements and characters. I think it's really interesting when you have characters that are more dark and misunderstood instead of like your clear-cut, happy-go-lucky, never do anything wrong. It just makes it more interesting, like, as you're reading it. And, like, they seem more like human beings instead of, like I said, like, these, like, picturesque, perfect people, which don't exist in real life. There's obviously times where, like, there's, like, descriptions and it's, like, or dialogue that feels like it's going on forever and you're just kind of like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. But it really just kind of adds to, like, the story and the time that it was written in, which I think is great. I really do enjoy how it includes like a flashback as like the plot structure and like an element of the plot, because it's really interesting to start it off like in the present day and being introduced to our characters and like seeing who they are, and you're not sure why they're like that. So then being able to like flash back and then hear the whole story is it's like one of my favorite things that can happen in a book. So like in this case specifically, like when we're introduced to Heathcliff, he's very grumpy, he's very angry, he's not very friendly. So you're kind of wondering why. Did something happen? Like, why is he like this? What is his life like? And that's pretty much what the story of Wuthering Heights is. It's also really interesting because there's also like two different perspectives. So we start off with Lockwood, who kind of shows up in Wuthering Heights and he's like really intrigued and he's like, these people are kind of weird, like what's going on? And then as he talks to Nellie and she starts like giving her eyewitness accounts and her side of the story, you can kind of see how like the perspective changes like as she's speaking. But as she's speaking, you can still like see every once in a while like Lockwood kind of jumping in and like his thoughts, because he's very judgmental, I think is the word I'm going to say. He's very like, this is society. These are the societal norms. So when Nellie talks about something that's maybe like not normal to society, you can kind of see there's like a sentence or two here or there where like you can see it's like Lockwood's stream of consciousness being like, oh God, God forbid, oh my God. And then as for like a recommendation, I would recommend this book to anyone. I think it's full of really beautiful imagery, figurative language, great characters, a great story. It's interesting. And it just really makes you think. And I think it's fun and I think it's great. All right, now that we've done our non-spoiler section of the review, we will be jumping into spoilers now. So spoiler warning. If you want to go read, come back. Your choice. So first I'm just going to go over our characters, just their names, nothing too detailed. We'll get into that. So we have Heathcliff, Catherine Earnshaw, Henley Earnshaw, Mr. Earnshaw, Nellie, Lockwood, Edgar Linton, and Isabella Linton. Now, Wuthering Heights is quite the tale. Quite the tale, I say. So, Wuthering Heights. We start off in present day. Lockwood arrives at Thrushcross Grange as a tenant. He's a tenant there. And so his landlord lives in Wuthering Heights. And like this is like in the moors. So they're like two homes that like are like estates that are next to each other. So Lockwood decides to visit Heathcliff, who is his landlord at Wuthering Heights. So Lockwood shows up, he's there, and he's getting weird vibes. He's getting some very weird vibes. You know, Heathcliff is very grumpy, he's very angry. He doesn't really treat, you know, his staff very friendly. Just not a very nice man. And then, you know, he decides he has to end up spending the night at Wuthering Heights, and weird stuff happens. He thinks he sees a ghost. He hears about this strange girl, Catherine. He's like, what's going on? Heathcliff loses his mind, and Lockwood's like, this is weird. What's going on? So he heads back to Thrushcross Grange the next day, and he starts talking to Nellie, who was a servant for Heathcliff for pretty much his entire life and has known Heathcliff. And he's begging Nellie, he's like, please, you know, what's going on with this man, with this, like, place? Like, can you tell me? So she finally agrees, and Nellie begins to talk about, like, Heathcliff's history and the history of Wuthering Heights. And that is when we flash back. So we open up the flashback. It's about 20 years earlier, I'd say, my estimate. And we have Mr. Earnshaw. So Mr. Earnshaw, he owns the estate of Wuthering Heights. So, you know, he goes off to Liverpool, and he comes back. And when he comes back with a little boy, a little orphan. And that little orphan is a young Heathcliff. So Mr. Earnshaw decides to bring him in, raise him as his own, right? But Mr. Earnshaw already has 2 children. Henley, his heir, and Catherine, his daughter. So, you know, Mr. Earnshaw brings back this homeless, poor little boy. God forbid. God forbid. And his children are horrendous. Absolutely foul. Like, they're done. They're done. They're very mean, a little bit racist, because Heathcliff has a darker skin tone, and they don't like that. But, you know, as time goes on and they start to, you know, be raised with Heathcliff as step-siblings, Catherine grows to love him. Yes, you heard that right. Catherine grows to love him, and he, her, yeah, step-siblings in a way. You know, adopted brother, kind of, you know, yeah. However, though, Henley hates Heathcliff, still hates him, doesn't grow on him at all, despises him. And that's because Mr. Earnshaw shows Heathcliff more affection. And then, you know, Mr. Earnshaw just kind of wakes up one day and he sends Henley to college. He goes, go, I'm going to stay with Heathcliff and Catherine. You go to college. I don't want you here. So, you know, Henley's a little bitter, a little racist, but, you know. So, you know, eventually, you know, time goes on. Catherine and Heathcliff are in love. They're young and in love. Love you, adopted brother. That's normal. But, you know, Henley comes back. And, you know, he's like, I will destroy Heathcliff. I will destroy you. I will ruin your life. And he wants to get rid of him, right? So, you know, Mr. Earnshaw dies. Henley becomes, you know, the heir apparent. He inherits Wuthering Heights. He makes Heathcliff a laborer, a common worker. God forbid, right? God forbid he has to work. But it is heinous. The behavior is not okay. But, you know, Heathcliff is fine because him and Catherine are in La La Land, you know, in love, frolicking through the moors, just having the time of their lives. But that's until they meet the Lintons, when they're over by Thrushcross Grange. And they meet them because Catherine gets bitten by their dog and has to stay there for 5 weeks to recover. Now let me tell you, if I ever get bitten by a dog and it takes me 5 weeks to recover, humbling. Humbling is all I will say. But anyways, you know, they end up at the Lintons and they meet Edgar and Isabella Linton, 2 siblings. The Lintons. And, you know, they're complete opposites of Heathcliff and Catherine. Like, they're kind of like foils of them. Like, Heathcliff and Catherine, they're like wild and they're free and they frolic through the moors and they're all in love and they're kind of siblings and they share a dad, kind of, and it's weird. And Edgar and Isabella are like, oh, hoity-toity. They're, you know, they are society. Yeah. And, you know, they meet Catherine and Heathcliff and they eat up Catherine. They're like, ooh, girl, we like you. But they're like, Heathcliff? Ew. Ew. You know, once again, a little bit racist. They're like, he's poor, he's uneducated, he's dirty, he's gross. You know, God forbid the wealthy try to help out those less fortunate. God forbid. So, you know, Heathcliff, he's an outsider again. He's once again being put in this proposition. You know, first it was Henley, you know, making him work. And now it's the Lintons, you know, pushing him away. And, you know, Catherine kind of meets Edgar and she's like, well, you know, you're kind of like a man. Like, you're what society wants me to be with. You know, Heathcliff is great, but he's wild. He's like a beast. He's like an animal. But you're like societal man. Like, you're who I should be with. So she becomes infatuated, right? So, you know, at first she's trying to like split time with both Edgar and Heathcliff, but eventually she just kind of like starts to drop Heathcliff. And that's a big no-no for Heathcliff. You know, my favorite toxic man, let me tell you. He becomes extremely jealous to the point where I'm like, honestly, maybe this is a good thing. Like, you guys are kind of like siblings, but like, maybe, you know, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Oh no, not for Mr. Heathcliff. Oh no. So, you know, Henley, you know, the brother of Catherine, and technically Heathcliff, his wife dies. His wife is irrelevant. She didn't do anything important. But, you know, he dies, so he just, you know, becomes an alcoholic, as some do, I guess. Not most, I should say. But, you know, he becomes an alcoholic, and he's just hammering Heathcliff. He's like, you're horrible, you're scum, do this work. So, you know, it gets to the point where Heathcliff, he's fed up. All that's holding him there is Catherine, right? But then Catherine tells Nellie that she will never marry Heathcliff. She never will. She can't. And he overhears this and he leaves in a fit of rage, right? You know, because once again, why talk about your problems or issues you're having when you can just run away? You know, when you can just take that toxic behavior. Yeah. So he runs away, you know, he goes away for 3 years. So he leaves. So Catherine has Edgar. She gets married to him, right? Her next to her little neighbor. You know, she's like, I can climb society now. This is great. But then all of a sudden, Heathcliff returns. Oh! So, you know, he returns. And guess who he moves in with? Henley. His stepbrother, abuser, adoptive. I don't know what they are. I think it's adoptive. I won't say step, I'll say adoptive. But, you know, moves in with him. The guy who made his life a living hell. But, you know, he just does that. And then you know what this man does? He marries Isabella, Edgar's sister, which makes him and Catherine sister and brother-in-laws, even though they, you know, used to be madly and wildly in love. Oh no, apparently not wildly and madly enough, because, you know, he decides to marry Isabella. But then we learn that this is all just a scheme, a plot of revenge, right? Because what he wants to do is live with Henley, make him lose all his money, make him lose everything because he's this alcoholic, he has nothing. So then he can inherit Wuthering Heights, and then marries Isabella so that when her dad dies, he will be able to inherit Thrushcross Grange as well. The ultimate revenge. So, you know, yeah, he's married as well. Absolutely horrible man. I have never abusive, mean, rude, cruel, absolutely disgusting and foul. Like, this man, I don't care if your plot is revenge. You are icky. Icky boy. Like, I'm sorry that they treated you so horribly. Your actions are not the answer. Not the answer at all. So, you know, that's all happened. And, you know, Catherine and Edgar, you know, they're kind of strained because Heathcliff came back and they have their differences. But, you know, Catherine gets pregnant. She gives birth to a beautiful baby girl, Kathy Jr. And then she dies. Yeah. She gets sick. She gets brain fever, I believe, and just dies, right? And Heathcliff loses his mind. Even though he came back, married her sister-in-law, all for a plot for revenge, you know. He's devastated. He begs her spirit to stay on Earth, saying she can haunt him or drive him mad as long as she stays with him. Yeah, that's not weird at all. So anyways, that happens, and Isabella, thank God, finally decides to flee and leave Heathcliff. And after she does, she gives birth to her and Heathcliff's son, Linton. Yes, as in her previous maiden name. It's confusing. We will clarify later. So, you know, she flees. Good for her, right? Get out. Save yourself from that horrible man. And then, you know, flash forward 13 years. Flash forward, well, because why not, right? Because, you know, we're already sitting here like, so why not just keep, you know, mixing it up? So 13 years later, Nellie is still a maid. But this time she's helping raise Cathy, who, you know, is also very headstrong like her mother, very kind of wild and free, but she's still a little bit reserved and like socially acceptable because of her father, Edgar. Thank you, Edgar. And she has no idea about Wuthering Heights. Like, her little neighbors, no idea. No idea that her, you know, adoptive brother, her family, her mom was from there. It's like they're next to, no idea. Homegirl's oblivious. No clue what's going on. And so this is all going on, you know, in Wuthering Heights, Thrushcross Grange, whatever. And then Isabella dies. Yeah, 13 years later, she dies. Kicks the bucket. And so her son is sent to live with Heathcliff, his father, who he's never met. And Heathcliff is horrible to him. Worse than he was to Isabella. So mind you, Linton, he's a sickly little boy. He's sick. He is ill. He is fragile. He is frail. Heathcliff does not mess with that at all. Yeah, he's like, you are horrible. You are not my son. You are disgusting. Blah, blah, blah. Abusive to his son. You know, being abusive to his wife just wasn't enough, you know. He had to just take it home with his only child. So then, you know, after all those events, you know, we're going to flash forward another 3 years. So Cathy finally makes her way down to Wuthering Heights, kind of gets out of this obliviousness. And she meets Heathcliff and she's like, you know, they have some... He's once again, he's not nice to her. He's not nice to anybody. He's a very mean man. A very mean man. But while she's down there, she also meets Linton, Heathcliff's son, and Isabella's son, meaning her cousin. And they fall in love. Yeah, they do. They fall in love. And so they, you know, start having this secret relationship because nobody can know. And they're sending letters back and forth, and then Nellie burns, and it's a torrid love affair, and you know, mind you, again, like I said, Linton is sickly, so, you know, Cathy is there nursing him back to health and helping him, and they're cousins. But you know what? It was acceptable at the time, so we'll pretend like it's acceptable now. Anyways, but you know, we find out as we're reading, Heathcliff is forcing Linton to meet up with her. He knows about it. He is forcing her to meet up. Heathcliff is forcing Linton to meet up with Cathy so that they can get married, and then Heathcliff can finally control Thrushcross Grange and get his revenge on Edgar. What is this man's obsession? What is this man's obsession? Not only did he ruin Cathy's life, Isabella's life, Henley's life, kind of. Henley was not nice to, but you know what I mean? Now you're going after your son and Catherine's daughter, Cathy? Like, what? Okay. So, you know, Edgar's finally getting old. He still hasn't died. So you know what Heathcliff does? He's getting sick of this. He lures Nellie and Cathy to Wuthering Heights and holds them hostage until Cathy agrees to marry Linton, his son. Forces her. Won't let her leave until she marries his son so he can get control of her father's estate. So, you know, she ends up does marrying him, right? Yeah. She marries him. Yeah. And then both Edgar, her father, and Linton, her new husband, die. Good for you, Kathy. Oh, but, that's not enough, Heathcliff he's not done yet, my man Heath. Oh no, he decides to then make Kathy his servant. His servant. Makes her work for him. He goes, I didn't like your father. He married the love of my life, your mother. But it's not complicated at all, right? So at this point, we're now in present day. And now Heathcliff is renting out Thrushcross Grange to Lockwood. So we're in present day. Lockwood has heard Nellie's whole story. He's mortified. He's like, this is horrible. You're disgusting. You're vile. What the heck is wrong with you? You are a horrible person. He is. Did Lockwood lie? Did he lie? No. So he leaves, but then, he comes back 6 months later. He's curious. He wants to visit Nellie, see how she's doing, working and living with this horrible man, and learns even more shocking information, right? So after he had left, Kathy fell in love with Hareton. Now, Hareton was Henley's son, and he was very illiterate, not a very smart boy. When he speaks in the book, you can tell that he's not literate. Like, he has no education. So, Kathy falls in love with and marries her other cousin on her dad's side of the on her mom's side of the family. Her first husband was on the dad's side of the family. This one's on the mom's, just marrying cousins back to back. She crazy. So anyway, so she marries him. Yeah, falls in love. And then Heathcliff, just so consumed by grief and revenge, starts seeing Catherine, his old lover, everywhere, and starts hallucinating her ghost. And then one day, while on a nice stroll through the moors, dies. He dies. Yeah. So, it ends with Kathy and Hareton, inheriting both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. And then Lockwood visits Heathcliff's and Catherine's graves. Yeah. So that's Wuthering Heights for you. And I know you may be thinking, what's going on? What's going on? Well, I'll help explain more with this family tree that I made. Yes, this family tree. It might be backwards in that. I will insert a photo if I need to. Right? So purple here, we have Wuthering Heights, that estate. Pink here is Thrushcross Grange. So, over at Wuthering Heights, we have Mr. and Miss Earnshaw. Their two kids, Henley and Catherine. Then we have Mr. and Miss Linton of TG, Thrushcross Grange. And their two kids, Edgar and Isabella. So, and then, down over here, we have Heathcliff, who is the adoptive son of Mr. Earnshaw. So, time passes. So, Catherine and Edgar marry. They have Kathy. Isabella and Heathcliff marry after Heathcliff and Catherine, who are technically adoptive siblings, are just so madly in love with each other. Like, can't live without one another, but then they leave each other. Oh, the angst. So, now they're technically, in-laws. So then Isabella and Heathcliff have Linton, and Miss Catherine and Edgar have Kathy. Then Kathy and Linton get married in the first marriage, cousins. But then Linton dies because he's a sick boy. So then, time goes on, and Kathy marries Hareton, her uncle's son. And this is Wuthering Heights right here. Why can't these people escape? Free these people from the shackles of Wuthering Heights. Let me tell you. Now here's the thing. Yes, it's crazy. Yes, it's wild. And yes, at times I'm like, this is so wrong and weird. However, it does show a really great theme of how even people, like all people can be cruel. all people can be mean. People were so worried about societal norms and rising in society during that period of time and like what that could cost. And I think it really just shows how Heathcliff's revenge like consumed him. It's a lot like Macbeth in a it is kind of like Macbeth in a way, where it just like it consumed him and it took him over, and then he kind of looked around and was like, well, the only thing I ever loved like died because of this, and I've ruined all these lives, I've ruined my life. So it's very interesting. And I would, like I said earlier, I would recommend it to anybody though. You know, you're in for a wild ride. Anyways, thank you for watching my review on Wuthering Heights.